A state commission has called for reversing the dismissal of a black recruit by the Boston Police Department. The recruit was dismissed for allegedly cheating on a test, but his attorneys argue that other recruits who violated policy were treated differently, and the Mass Commission Against Discrimination ruled the department failed to justify its decision. To talk about the case is the litigation director with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Economic Justice, Oren Sellstrom. Thank you very much for being with us, Oren.
Thank you for having me.
Talk about the recruit, Claude Defay.
Claude Defay is a lifelong resident of Dorchester of Haitian descent. He was in the finance industry and had a well-paying job there, but really wanted to be a police officer. And so quit his job in the financial industry in order to go to the police academy and become a police officer.
Now, there are some allegations here saying that he did something he shouldn't have done, and he probably deserved some kind of penalty for that.
Well, we dispute that, but regardless, the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination found that the crux of this case was about whether or not black recruits are treated similarly to white recruits in terms of discipline. And a neutral fact finder from the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination found that there is differential treatment, and went through, after a 5-day trial, really methodically through the evidence and found that there is disparate treatment of minority officers and white officers in terms of the recruit class. And that is the basis of the Commission's holding, reinstating Mr. Defay, ordering compensation, and ordering the police department to cease and desist from this kind of disparate treatment. Now,
talk about some of these other violations, because they were not similar, but at the same time, these are officers, white officers in this case, who only, got a warning?
That's right. I mean, in fact, what these other officers or recruits engaged in was far worse even than what was alleged against Mr. Defay. For example, 2 white officers who were brawling publicly outside of a bar, sending at least one of them to the emergency room. That was dismissed by the department as mere horseplay. They were given a slap on the wrist. Other black recruits in situations far less severe were given much harsher punishment.
And what kind of things were they allegedly doing?
Well, so one allegation was that a black recruit had misrepresented to a teacher whether or not he should bring his uniform to class. That was considered lying by the police department and was enough, they say, to justify dismissal from the academy altogether. You contrast that with the case of these white police officers who were fighting and essentially beating each other up in public in front of a bar. They were allowed to stay in the police academy and go on to the force.
I think there was also a case of speeding.
That's right. Another recruit who was speeding through a red light at speeds of up to 60 miles an hour, had a number of other disciplinary issues, and he as well was not dismissed from the academy, but essentially given a slap on the wrist.
When I try to make some sense out of the difference here, I'm thinking, maybe the department views impulse control problems as less serious than lying. I mean, could there be some grounds for that, maybe?
I don't think so. I think what is really going on here is differential treatment based on race, and that's what the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination found was at the root of this. That the incidents were not different, that these were similarly situated individuals, or in fact that the black officer recruits incidents were much of a lesser degree. And yet the treatment was much more harsh, and the factor that it comes down to is that they were of different races than the other recruits.
Now, what's interesting, I also read that these different violations that we've been talking about, and I could see how one might be easy to classify differently than another, but I guess they all count as a Class 1 violation.
Well, there was dispute about that. There was some attempt on the part of the department to classify different types of offenses. Essentially what the Massachusetts Commission Against Discrimination found, though, was that even within that, there was a lot of discretion given to what kind of punishment was handed down to recruits based on the incidents involved. And again, when it came down to what the deciding factor was, it was really not based on the incidents themselves, but based essentially on the race of the recruits. And that is why the commissioner, the hearing officer, ordered the department to cease and desist this kind of differential treatment and ordered the reinstatement of the particular officer.
Talk about the significance of this case, because anybody could come to you with a grievance of some kind, and you might say there's some merit to this, but maybe it's just a one-time example. What made you think that this is a case that you really needed to take up?
Well, that's precisely why this case is so important, because this is a case where sometimes when an individual is going through a situation like this, he or she may have a feeling that he or she is being treated differently on account of their race. And what this decision does is to show in a very methodical, very specific way, comparing different treatment of different recruits of different races and making this finding of discrimination. And that is really what is so important about this decision, is that it takes it outside of the anecdotal information and really puts it in the realm of hard evidence.
Well, I'm going to push you back to the anecdotal part of this, because what was this dismissal like for Claude Defay?
It was awful for him. As I say, this was his dream, to be a police officer. He was a successful career in the financial industry, left that behind in order to go to the police academy because he wanted to serve his community. And so to have him be dismissed from the academy was wrenching for him and contributed to significant emotional distress for him. It's a very difficult thing to have happen.
All right, thank you very much for being with us. Oren Sellstrom from the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Economic Justice.